Chapter 7 is about economic issues. And when we're first looking at economic issues, we want to look at industrial wage differentials. There was competition in the product market, and companies needed to look at the value that was added by employees. And labor costs were a percentage of total costs. Organizations had to evaluate jobs within the organization. So they looked at the job analysis and what was in the job. You look at the job description, which is a listing of the job factors, such as tasks, duties, and responsibilities that are required to perform the job. Then you look at job specifications, which is a list of the knowledge, skills, abilities, and other factors that are required by the holder of the job to be able to complete the job effectively. There are methods of job evaluation and seeing what the job is worth to the organization. So there are rankings that can be done. So it compares each job to the other jobs to create a hierarchy of the jobs. There are job classifications, so that would group similarly valued jobs into different classes. There can be a point system that assigns points to each job based on the degree to which the job factors are presented in a job. There are also production standards and wage incentives. Production standards are what is expected from an employee for their consistent output, and that is within the working capacities of the normal operators. Production standards are used as a basis for calculating standard and incentive wages. The goals for a wage incentive plan are to increase employee productivity, attract prospective employees, and to reward employees monetarily. An employee reward system can be lump sum bonuses or profit sharing plans, or there can be a skill-based pay, so you get paid based on what the skills are that you bring to the job. There can also be group gain sharing incentive plans. So there's the Scanlon plan, which is a sharing of savings from the reduction of total labor costs. The Rutger plan, which is a ratio of labor costs to dollar value added. And an Impro share, which is a reduction in labor costs over the base period of labor costs. There are some arguments used by management and union officials in determining wages. So there can be different factors in wage outcomes. There can be a differential feature of the job, wage comparability, the organization's ability to pay. It can also deal with productivity, cost of living, and real legal requirements. Some competitive factors are operating efficiencies and cost cutting. There can also be productivity improvements. Some internal factors are firm-specific labor costs, expected profits, and labor market conditions. Some arguments for the wage determination is wage comparability. So you want to look to see if wage rates are equal or related among comparable bargaining units. There's also the degree of labor intensiveness. Wages are less important and easier to bargain for when they are a low percentage of total costs. There's also the ability to pay, and it has limited usefulness. The focus is on firm performance, not on employee performance. Unions expect a firm in good financial condition to pay higher wages, but not reduce wages when the condition of the firm declines. And then there's productivity. Conceptually, workers' wages should vary with changes in their productivity, their output to cost. Productivity increases can occur for reasons unrelated to workers increasing their efficiencies. Then there's cost of living, and unions demand higher wages to maintain real wage purchasing power when the cost of living rises. And then we look at comparable worth, and that's the concept that different jobs that make comparable contributions to the organization should have the same pay rates. There are methods for adjusting wages. there are COLA provisions, which are scheduled wage increases based on the degree of change of a chosen index. So you have to select the index and base point, then look at the frequency and timing of the COLAs. You have to adopt the formula. So it could be 1 cent increase in wages for each 3-point rise in CPI. And then you need to cap or make an upper limit of the COLA. There can also be deferring wage increases in multiple year labor contracts. So it could be backloaded, where larger wage increases occur later in the contract period. If it's front loaded, then smaller wage increases occur later in the contract period. If it's even loaded, then the wage increases are equal in all the years of the contract. There can also be a lump sum payment adjustment, and that doesn't become part of regular compensation. There is also what's called a healthcare cost containment, and you need to pay attention to that with different employers. There is a time where the cost is shifting to the employees, so they have to pay the co-payments, the deductibles, and increase premiums to help offset the costs. There's also fee-for-service plans, so there could be a preferred provider organization or a PPO, and there's an agreement to a fixed or lower rate on the schedule of fees for their services to company employees. An HMO, or a health maintenance organization, contracts with the employer to deliver services to company employees for a fixed contract amount. Then we look at income maintenance. Sometimes employees will get a severance pay, and it provides employees with a lump sum payment at the time of the employee's termination. There can also be work sharing, which happens in order to avoid a layoff. So the parties will agree to working less than 40 hours, and 2 employees might share the same job and split it. There's also overtime pay, time and a half rates for all hours worked beyond an 8-hour day. The Fair Labor Standards Act requires overtime payment only after 40 regular hours of a work week instead of the 8-hour day. There's double time rates for Sundays and holidays. There is an equalization of overtime hours among workers, and it's typically done by seniority. And there can be mandatory overtime requirements within a required minimum advance notice. So they can't just say you have to work overtime today. It's usually advance notice. There can also be shift differentials, so hourly premiums paid for employees who work undesirable shifts. So if you're working third shift, there might be a shift differential. Employers also give paid leave benefits, so the holidays, and you have to be eligible for those different holidays. You have to work the scheduled workday before and the scheduled workday after a holiday to qualify for the holiday pay. Employees may also accrue vacation time, so their time increases with the employee's length of service usually. And they have to schedule those vacations, and usually that's based on seniority also. Another thing that employers will have in place are pensions. There can be a defined benefit plan for the pensions, and the plan pays retired employees at a specific amount each month. The employer must invest sufficient funds so it can be paid to the employees after they retire. Unions can affect pension plans. They can increase pension coverage and have larger benefits. The benefits can be skewed towards the senior employees, so they would get more of it. There can be higher increases in benefits even after retirement, and there can be an earlier age for employees to retire at. There are also 401k savings plans where employees will put money into a retirement account for themselves, and the employer may match that amount that the employee is putting away. It can be up to a certain amount. It doesn't have to be complete. There are other types of benefits that employers may extend to employees. There can be paid legal services. There can be an employee assistance plan, maybe tuition exchange. There might be some child care assistance also. So there's a lot of different ways that employers can give additional bonuses or benefits to employees. Chapter 8 looks at administrative issues, and some of those issues that we're going to talk about are technological changes, job security and personnel changes, and that can deal with work scheduling and things like that. So we talk about technological changes. It involves the introduction of labor-saving machines, and that can reduce the amount of hours that employees may need to work. Automation displace humans who formerly did the same job, and it alters job characteristics and required skills. Unions can protect job interests from the effects of technological changes, and a couple ways that they can do this is by negotiating contract language. They can lobby for or against government regulations and assistance programs. They can provide direct services to members to assist them in adjusting to or coping with the change, and they can become voluntarily involved in the technology selection process. As we all know, there are positive effects of technological changes in our daily lives, and there are positive effects of these changes in companies also. So there can be a higher productivity that produces greater wealth with less effort. There can be an elimination of menial and dangerous jobs. There can be higher wages and better working conditions, even shorter hours. And there's an increased skill level that can increase pay and result in a higher standard of living. Some of the negative effects of technological changes are elimination and de-skilling of jobs that lowers pay and reduces job security. It displaces intellectual skills of human operators. The company itself incurs higher capital investment requirements. There's increased productivity, which will result in market oversupply, and that causes product prices to drop. So let's talk about job security and personnel changes that are administrative issues also. So there have to be different job assignments, job content, working hours, seniority, wages, and training. We're going to discuss job security first. And one of the issues when it comes to job security is layoffs. In 1988, there was a Worker Adjustment and Retaining Notification Act, or the WARN Act, which covers employers with 100 or more employees, and requires 60 days advance notice of plant closing or major layoffs involving a third of the workforce. It exempts firms in financial collapse or unforeseen operational difficulties, and has no designated agency to enforce this act. Employees and unions must sue their employer to recover damages if this happens. Other issues that can happen that involve job security are subcontracting, which is in contracting work to an outside vendor when the employer cannot do all or part of the work, or when the vendor can do the work at a lower cost. There's also outsourcing, which is contracting work that the employer does not do to an outside vendor to reduce costs. Offshoring is movement of work from a company location within the United States to locations outside the United States. There can also be work transfer and relocation, which is moving work to another facility or location. Work rules are also affected by work scheduling. Some employers use flex time, which allows an employee to start and finish his or her work at his or her discretion, as long as the specified total number of hours per week or per day are worked and the employee is present at work during the core hour periods. There can also be a compressed work week, which consists of 4 10-hour days with 3 days off each week, or 8 9-hour days and 1 8-hour day, permitting 1 extra day off every 2 weeks. Seniority can play an effect on work rules. Seniority is an employee's continuous service with the firm, and it's an objective measure that's readily determined. It's possessed by all the employees covered by the contract. There were some legal issues involving seniority, and the Supreme Court made some decisions. So there's a bona fide seniority system that's permitted. Employees can be awarded retroactive seniority as a remedy for past discriminatory practices. The use of seniority in layoffs is permitted where the layoff may or does adversely impact minorities. Work rules can also apply to employee training. So there can be formal programs like apprenticeships, new employee orientations, safety and health training, basic skills of the job, job-specific skills, and workplace practices. There can also be informal training, which is usually on-the-job training or mentoring. Safety and health is a big factor for employers. There is a standards and provisions under the Occupational Safety and Health Act, or OSHA, from 1970. Now there's an emergence of new biological and chemical hazards in the workplace, so employers and employees really need to pay attention to what they're doing and how safe they're acting. That's why safety and health training is super important, and it should be an ongoing thing. There's also rising health costs, so it's benefiting employers to make sure that everyone is working safely, because there can be increased legal claims by injured workers also. They all kind of work together in increasing costs at times if employees are not working safely or there's some kind of safety factor that is causing issues throughout the workplace. So that was the brief overview of Chapter 8. So now we have 7 and 8. If you have any questions, again, as always, please feel free to reach out to me and send me your questions through email, and I will be happy to help. Thanks.